Shocker alert, Hollywood royalty rebels on live TV. John Travolta's explosive clash with George Stephanopoulos turns Good Morning America into a battleground. Hold on to your seats, folks, because what unfolded on Good Morning America today wasn't just a chat, it was a heart-pounding, earth-shattering showdown that left jaws on the floor, producers in a panic, and social media ablaze. Imagine this: John Travolta, the icon who danced his way into our souls, flew jets with swagger, and sang through decades of legendary film, steps onto the set. He's there to hype his latest movie, flashing that million-dollar grin, ready to play the Hollywood game. But when George Stephanopoulos, a sharp-witted host known for digging deep, starts prodding at Travolta's career flops and personal scars, something snaps. What was meant to be a breezy morning segment spirals into one of the most intense, uncomfortable, and downright unforgettable moments in TV history. This wasn't a derailment. It was a full-blown explosion, and we're breaking it all down. Before we jump into the chaos, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever seen a star flip the script like this? What do you think about celebrities pushing back on tough questions now? Let's unpack how John Travolta turned a routine interview into a fiery, no-holds-barred confrontation that had everyone buzzing to set up. A legend walks in smiling, but not for long. It all kicked off like any other Good Morning America segment. The lights were dazzling, the coffee was brewing, and the crowd was buzzing with excitement. John Travolta, the man who gave us Saturday Night Fever, Grease, and Pulp Fiction, strolled onto the set with that megawatt smile that's been charming audiences for generations. At 71, he's still got that magnetic charisma, that spark that makes you believe he could talk his way out of anything. George Stephanopoulos, the host with a knack for blending warmth with hard-hitting questions, greeted him like an old pal. The audience roared, the cameras rolled, and for the first few minutes, everything was smooth sailing. They started with Travolta's new film, a gritty, passion-driven project that marks his return to a role fans have been clamoring for. Travolta lit up as he shared juicy behind-the-scenes stories, the grueling physical training, the hours spent diving into his character's psyche, and the thrill of collaborating with a bold new director. George nodded along, tossing out easy questions about the movie's themes and Travolta's preparation. It was classic morning show stuff, light, promotional, the kind of chat that makes you want to grab a ticket. But then, like a storm rolling in, the vibe shifted. George leaned forward, his eyes narrowing just a bit, his voice taking on that serious, let's get your tone. He veered away from the new film and toward a topic that's been whispered about in Hollywood for years: Travolta's recent string of box office duds. With the precision of a seasoned interviewer, he brought up the films that didn't land, the ones critics trashed, the ones that didn't pack theaters like Grease or Face Off. Did he mention the industry buzz, the articles questioning whether Travolta's days as a leading man were over? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. John, how do you respond to critics who say your best years are behind you? The first crack, Travolta pushes back the studio. When dead quiet, Travolta's smile didn't vanish, but it tightened like a mask, slipping just enough to reveal something raw. His eyes, those famous baby blues, flickered with something annoyance, defiance. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, and let the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone squirm. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but there was a steel in it that hadn't been there before. You know, George, he said, slow and deliberate. It's funny how every interview seems to circle back to this failure decline, like that's the only story worth telling. He paused, letting the words sink. And I've been doing this for over 40 years. I've had hits that changed the game, and I've had misses that taught me more than the wins ever could. But why is it always about what didn't work? Why not talk about the risks? I took the stories. I fought to tell the art. I poured my soul into weather it. Made $1 billion, or not. The audience shifted in their seats. George's credit didn't flinch. He's been in tough spots before, and he knows how to handle a curveball. I hear you, John. He said, his tone steady. I'm not trying to dwell on failure. I'm just curious how you see this chapter of your career, especially compared to massive successes of Saturday Night Fever or Pulp Fiction. Do you feel pressure to recapture that magic? That's when Travolta's demeanor changed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice rising just enough to signal he wasn't playing anymore. See, that's the problem. George's obsession with comparing everything to the past, like unless I'm dancing in a white suit or quoting Tarantino, I'm somehow less than. I'm not chasing 1977 or 1994. I'm here now making choices that matter to me. Why can't we talk about that? Why does it always have to be John Travolta's not as big as he used to be? The tension was electric. You could almost hear the producers whispering in their headsets, wondering if they should cut to A commercial, but this was live TV, and there was no escape. George tried to pivot, asking about Travolta's shift to smaller independent films instead of blockbuster franchises. Is that a deliberate choice, he asked, or is it about what opportunities are out there? Travolta's eyes narrowed. You're doing it again, George, framing it like I'm settling, like I'm taking indie roles. Because I can't get the big ones. That's not how it works. I choose projects that challenge me, that push me grow. I'm not out here begging for a superhero cape. I'm working with young directors, telling stories that don't get told otherwise. And you know what? I'm proud of that, even if the box office doesn't light up like it's 1980 The Breaking. Point personal pain enters the chat. George, sensing the interview slipping away, tried a different angle. He brought up Travolta's personal life, specifically the tragedies that have marked his journey, the loss of his son Jet in 2009, the passing of his wife, Kelly Preston. In 2020, George's tone softened as he asked, John, you've been open about your grief, about how you've navigated unimaginable loss. Has that changed how you approached your work, your relationship with fame? The studio went silent. Travolta's jaw clenched, his eyes locked onto George. Like a laser for a moment, it looked like he might not answer at all. When he did, his voice was low, heavy, with barely contained fury. George, you don't get to do that. You don't get to drag my pain, my family, my losses into a conversation about box office numbers and career arcs. That's not a plot twist for your morning show. That's my life. And it's not here for you to use as some cheap narrative device to explain why my movies didn't make enough money. The audience gasped. George blinked. Clearly caught off guard, he tried to backpedal, insisting he hadn't meant to exploit Travolta's grief, that he was only trying to understand how those experiences shaped his perspective. But Travolta wasn't having it. No, George, he cut in, his voice sharp. Now you don't get to hide behind. I'm just asking questions. I came here to talk about my film, not to be psychoanalyzed on live TV. My grief, my losses, those are mine. They're not talking points to make your segment more dramatic. The air in the studio was thick with tension. George shifted in his seat, his face a mix of frustration and calculation. He took a breath and try to regain control. John, the first, respect your boundaries, he said, but as someone who's shared parts of your story publicly, it's natural for journalists to explore how those experiences influence your work. That's not exploitation. It's giving viewers insight into the artist they love. Travolta let out a bitter chuckle. Insight? Is that what you call it? Because to me, it feels like you're fishing for a soundbite, something emotional to clip and blast across social media. You haven't asked me one real question about the film, not about the story, the characters, the vision. It's all been about my decline, my struggles. That's not journalism, George. That's a script you're following, and I'm done playing along. The showdown, two titans clash. What happened next was pure dynamite. George's patience wearing thin, pushed back. John, you're here voluntarily. Nobody forced you to come on Good Morning America. If you don't like the questions, maybe you should have set clearer boundaries with the producers. But turning every question into an attack on journalism isn't productive. It makes it impossible to have a real conversation. Travolta's eyes flashed. He leaned forward, his voice rising for the first time. Real conversation, George, let's be honest. This show isn't about real conversations. It's about ratings, clicks, and keeping people watching to the commercial breaks. You want drama, conflict, something to go viral. Well, congratulations, you're getting it. But don't sit there and pretend this is about journalistic integrity. You're asking the same tired questions every interviewer asks, pushing the same narrative about my career being over, and when I push back, suddenly I'm the one who's difficult. George's face hardened. That's unfair, John. I spent decades building a reputation as a journalist who asks tough questions, who holds people accountable. Just because you don't like the questions doesn't mean they're not valid. Being a public figure means accepting scrutiny about your work, your choices. You don't get to control the narrative completely. Travolta fired back. Without missing a beat, there's a difference between scrutiny and condescension. George, you came into this with a story already written. John Travolta's career is fading. Every question was designed to prop that up. No matter what I say, you're going to spin it to fit that angle. That's not journalism. It's agent-driven interviewing. And I'm calling out the studio as a pressure cooker. The producers off camera were likely sweating bullets, unsure whether to let this play out or pull the plug. But George and Travolta were locked in, two pros at the top of their game, neither willing to back down. George took a moment, then pressed on John. Do you think all criticism of your recent work is unfair? Do you believe journalists and critics have it out for you? Or can you acknowledge that some of their concerns might have merit? The question was a gut punch, and you could see it land. Travolta's expression darkened, and for a split second it looked like he might walk off the set, but he stayed, composing himself before answering. George, you're assuming criticism equals truth. That if enough people say something, it must be right. I've been in this game for 40 years. I know better than to think every review or hot take is gospel. Some criticism is fair, sure, but a lot of it's just noise. It's about trends, clicks, and what critics need a right to stay relevant. I'm not defensive about honest feedback. What I'm sick of is this narrative that, because my last few films didn't break box office records, some has been clinging to relevance. That's lazy. The heart of the fight. Travolta takes control. Travolta's voice grew stronger, more passionate. He wasn't just defending himself now. He was dismantling the entire system. I've made choices that matter to me. He said, I've worked with first-time directors taking roles that scare me, projects that didn't have a guaranteed paycheck. Some of those films didn't hit bigs and got torn apart by critics. But I'm proud of them. I'm proud of betting on art over commerce. And I'm tired of people acting like unless I'm headlining a franchise film, I'm failing. That's not failure. That's courage. George, sensing an opening, tried to reframe. No one's calling you a failure, John. I'm just asking you to reflect on your career's different phases. That standard or interviews like this, your reaction feels disproportionate to the questions. Travolta's eyes blazed. Disproportionate. George, you don't get to tell me how I should feel. When you're sitting there implying I'm insecure about my career, you don't know me, you don't get to. Psychoanalyze me on national TV if you want to talk about the industry, how it chews up talent, spits out anyone over 50, and only cares about opening weekend numbers. Let's have that talk, but don't dress up your gotcha questions as reflection and act surprised when I call out George wasn't backing down. We're trying to have that conversation, John. But every time I ask you to reflect, you deflect, you turn it into an attack on the media or the industry taking responsibility for your choices, acknowledging when things didn't work out. That's not failure, that's growth. Travolta laughed, but it was laced with frustration, responsibility. George, you've got some nerve talking about responsibility. When this whole setup is designed to be superficial, you bring me on for 8 minutes, ask pre-approved questions, and expect me to smile and plug my movie. But when I challenge a format, when I refuse to play along, suddenly I'm the one who's not engaging that hypocrisy, and it's stunning. The final blow, Travolta calls out the game. Travolta wasn't done. He turned to the camera, addressing the audience directly. This isn't about me versus George. He said, this is about an industry that's built on control. Interviewers like him control the narrative, and we're supposed to be grateful for the exposure. But I'm done with that. I don't need this show to validate my career. I'm here because my team thought it'd help the film. But clearly I misjudged. This isn't about art. It's about drama, and I'm not your puppet. George's professionalism. Fraying shot back, John, if you have such contempt for this format. Why are you here? Nobody forced you. Plenty of actors come on this show and have thoughtful conversations without turning it into a fight, insulting me, insulting the show. It's not productive. Travolta's smile was ice cold. Maybe those actors are better at playing the game, George. Maybe they're okay pretending everything's perfect, that the industry's fair, that the media's always honest. But I'm at a point where I'd rather call out the nonsense and smile through it. George tried one last time to salvage the segment. John, the first, appreciate your honesty, but there's a way to express frustration without being disrespectful. Millions of people are watching. Let's reset, talk about your film, and end on a positive note. Travolta shook his head. Reset. That's the problem, George. You want to smooth it over, make it neat and tidy like the last 10 minutes didn't happen. But real conversations are messy, they're tense. And the fact that you're rushing to wrap this up proves my point. This isn't about truth. It's about packaging. The aftermath, a moment that won't be forgotten. The interview ended abruptly with George thanking Travolta stiffly and cutting to commercial. But the fallout was instant. Clips of the exchange flooded social media with hashtags like Travolta Tantrum and GMA Clash trending. Within hours, fans praised Travolta for his raw honesty, while others called him oversensitive, accusing him of dodging accountability. Critics debated whether George had crossed a line or if Travolta had overreacted. What's undeniable is that this wasn't just an interview gone wrong. It was a cultural moment. Travolta's rebellion against the Hollywood machine, his refusal to let his story be shaped by someone else's narrative, struck a chord. Exposed the power dynamics at play in celebrity interviews, where stars are expected to perform gratitude while fielding questions that often feel like traps. So what do you think? Was Travolta right to push back, or did he take it too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep this conversation going. For now, one thing's clear. John Travolta didn't just walk off that set. He left a mark that'll be talked about for years.